All right, everybody. This is Robbie Cornelius. Welcome to Web Asset Group, the podcast sponsored by Go Brunch. And today I'm super excited because we have an enlightened, I'm going to say enlightened individual that's spreading her message all across the internet, the one and only Shamaiah. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate you for being here. I've been checking out some of your content, and you have some very uh, much needed thoughts on humanity, awakening. One of your recent videos talked about all of the truths that are being exposed throughout the world. I would just love to know about you, your journey, and how did you get to this point of sharing your powerful message?
Well, I would say, even from when I was a little girl, I think that I looked at the world differently through a different set of lenses because of like a lot of the suffering that I experienced. And so when you experience a lot of suffering, especially from early on, you have a little bit more depth. And so you start to have more questions about why things are the way they are. And so I'm just the type of person that I have a lot of questions, like, even with God, like I'm always, people say you're not supposed to question God, but I always ask God questions. I'm like, but why, but why, but why? So I was always that child, like, but why is it like this? Because there was a lot of things that was being told to me that just never made sense. And so I was always on this journey to find out the truth. And so it's really just my journey of wanting to know the truth is what has got me to dig deeper. And yeah, it definitely will take you down a rabbit hole. So I guess we probably would call me like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm okay with that because I believe there are a lot of conspiracies, and all of the things that people said, people were conspiracy theorists about, they all kind of manifested to be true. And so I'm just one to have a lot of questions, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with being called a conspiracy theorist.
I love that. I love everything you just said because I resonate with it so deeply because I experienced a lot of suffering as a child as well. So, have you shared your story on what caused you to suffer or the experiences you've gone through as a child? Have you shared that on social media yet?
I've shared, I would say, bits and pieces of it because it kind of have to. I would say that people have to be able to kind of like connect or relate. So I try to bring it in there to where it's relatable to people. But then I started to realize that like not a lot of people have experienced those things. So it's hard sometimes to relate. But I've shared bits and pieces. I mean, I can share here. I don't mind telling my testimony because I do believe, according to the Bible, it says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. So not only do I overcome, but other people overcome by hearing it. So I truly believe in sharing. But yeah, like from when I was a little girl, we grew up, me and my siblings and I, we grew up homeless and just very unstable because my mother, she had 6 children, and my stepdad, he was off and on drugs and things like that. And so we've always, like, she's always kept us in church though. So that was the interesting thing, is that even though we were experiencing all of this dysfunction, we were always in church. And so one thing I can say is that even though there were times that I felt like I wasn't raised properly, but one thing I can say is that my mother, she gave us Jesus. And so I had to develop my own personal relationship with God outside of what I was being exposed to, because it didn't make sense how we could go to church, but then we don't have nowhere to live or food in our fridge because of just even the dysfunction that my mother grew up in. And so it was basically a generational cycle that was just trickling down from one child to the other. And so I believe that I was born to be the breaker from my family. And so I've always been on that journey to like to see how can I break this cycle of instability and homelessness and just dysfunction. And I also believe that like a lot of the Black community, that is the story, you know, and it's definitely stems from history, but I also believe that, you know, we can break the curse if we believe that we can break the curse, and so it's really still according to your faith. And so I'm grateful that my mother, although there were things that were extremely dysfunctional, she always kept the foundation of faith, and that's what's kept me going up until now.
Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from New York, but I've lived a lot of places. Like I said, like we were very unstable. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and then I was raised in the Bronx, like my childhood years. And then we moved. We moved to Atlanta. We moved to Maryland. But I would say that I spent a significant amount of my life in Maryland because I graduated from high school there.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I resonate with that story so much. I mean, I grew up Southern, kind of with a Southern Baptist outlook on life, and just like you, I had a lot of questions that I was not getting the answers to, and I struggled with that for a long time. I think I struggled with it until I was 27 years old, and I remember facing that realization that, man, I'm not satisfied with just what I've been told. I need to seek, further information. So my question to you is, when did you have the courage to start questioning the things you were told?
That's a good question. I just, so when I was 11 years old, I had a vision of Jesus, and that was in the middle of the storm, as people may call it. I mean, it's all, I don't know a time where it wasn't a storm, you know what I'm saying, or things going on.
Yeah.
So I just I would have these experiences that I couldn't help but to just question, like, what does this even mean, you know? So
Mm.
when I had that vision, I would say that began my own personal relationship with God and my own personal experience with like just reality, like you know, that kind of really affected my perception. And so when I had the vision, it was in a dark room, and at the time our apartment had flooded, and I don't even know why. I guess it just was not made correctly or something, like with the pipes, but it would always flood. But that day it flooded so bad that it destroyed our furniture. And that's the day that my mother and I, we were sleeping on the couch in the living room, and it was dark, and I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew that all I saw was that same apartment that we were in, and it was a pool, and the pool was black, and it was just darkness all around me. But at the end of the pool, I saw a vision of Jesus, and I just saw he was just light. He was just glowing, and he had his arms open. And I knew, without him even opening his mouth, I knew that that meant he wanted me to walk across the water. And so I just remember taking a step, and then I just came to myself. I woke up and I was just like, where am I? What is that light? I remember I saw the light from the smoke detector, and I was asking my mother, what's that light? Because I was still trying to process in my mind, like, what just happened. And so just from then, I had so many questions. And I think that that kind of set the tone for how I live my life, because there's a lot of things that don't make sense. And I know for some people, like, their life may not have been like mine. I just think certain people are chosen to walk through certain experiences. Like, I believe God actually chooses people to suffer because it's certain people that he can trust with the suffering that will actually have a message for people when they overcome the suffering. And that's what develops purpose. And so I just think throughout my life, like God would show me different things and I would ask God because there wasn't anyone to mentor me. I didn't really have parents. My mother was, I believe, struggling with mental illness and spiritual illness. That's a term that I like to coin because people don't talk about that part, the dysfunctional side to religion. And so that's what I grew up experiencing. I didn't have anybody to tell me like, this is what this means or anything. So I had to ask God, and God would show me things and he would teach me things. And that's actually what the Bible says, that the Holy Spirit will lead you into all truth and teach you all things. And that's why he is our Father. So he was my father. He is my father. And he's taught me what I know. And so I had him to ask, and I would ask. And that's also what the Bible says to, seeking you'll find and knocking the door shall be open, or ask and you shall receive. And so I just always ask like, God, what does this mean? Or what's happening, And the one question that I would say that I had the most was, God, do you even hear me? Because there was moments where I would ask God and he would show me. And then there was a moment in a season in my life where I felt like God couldn't hear me because I was experiencing so much. Like I was in foster care. The foster care person was very verbally and psychologically abusive. And she was a Christian. You know what I'm saying? She also took me to church. So that's the interesting thing about my experience is that I would experience these things with people who were supposed to be people that were safe or supposed to be people that were supposed to believe in God. And that's why God had to show me the difference. And
the difference between religion and having your personal relationship.
Yes, sir. He had to show me the difference between spirit and truth and a person who's just a religious person. And just go through the religious traditional motions of the faith. And so I saw that like, wow, like, because that could have made me walk away from God. The things that even my mother would show me, being in the church. So I had to really lean on my faith based off of the experiences that God was showing me. And actually he used those things to show me the truth. And so I didn't have anybody to really ask, like, what does this mean? What am I experiencing? What is God showing me? Like, I had to seek him for it. But even when I was asking him, like the times where I was like, God, can you hear me? Like, do you even hear me? Then I found out that that's actually what my name means. And so my name is in the Bible. It's spelled Shemaiah in the Bible. And it means heard by God. And so I found that out through the times when I felt like God could not hear me. Like, so, and then I would, like, my mother again would take me to church and I would get called out by like the prophets or the guest speakers or whatever. And they would prophesy to me about my life. And one in particular, he told me, he was like, I see you crying on your pillow. And that's what I would do at the foster care place that I was at. I would always cry on my pillow. So there were specific things that I'm like, only God could have revealed this information. And that's what really started the journey. And at the time I was like 14 when I was in foster care. And so just having all these questions, and even when I felt like God wasn't answering me, he would show me, and I would experience things that would give me the answer.
So what was one of the biggest differences that you discovered from having the courage to question things on your own compared to the things that everyone trained you to believe? Like, what's one of the biggest realizations you've had since then?
That was, so I can pinpoint a specific moment, and that was, so my mother, she was following this prophet who I found out that he was a false prophet. He would send us letters in the mail, and it would say like, at such and such date, this is going to happen. XYZ is going to happen. All you got to do is sow your seed. All you got to do is give this amount of money. And he would send us like ribbons and pennies. And it was like the tooth fairy, you know, just put your ribbon under the pillow. And then on such and such date, this is going to happen. And so I would get those letters as well. Ironically, we would get the same letter, you know, and so I would do that, and I would look on my calendar because we were in so much poverty that's all I had to look forward to, and I didn't realize that my mother was actually giving her last to receive these letters and ribbons and pennies and holy water or whatever. So when I saw that it wasn't happening, I realized, like, wait a minute. This is something else going on. You know what I'm saying? Like, this can't be right. The God that I'm being told about versus what I'm experiencing is two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, because it wouldn't happen. And then I started thinking like, well, God, are you not more powerful than the devil? You know what I'm saying? Because it would also, the way that I was taught to believe was that, like, oh, the devil's doing this, the devil's doing that. And the devil was so magnified and glorified. Like, if my mother would drop a pork chop, the devil's a liar. Like, I'm like, everything can't possibly be the devil. And so I just, I started to realize, like, okay, this can't be right, you know? But then again, God would show me things. And I realized at that moment that this is a relationship thing. This is a religious thing.
Yeah.
Even like, I didn't read the Bible like that, but God would show me things that actually aligned with the Bible or the scriptures. And I realized as an adult, God is the Word. The Word was God and the Word is God, right? So it's not necessarily about the book of the Bible, because there's people that throw the Bible in the trash or rip the pages out. Does it lose its power? And so that's where God taught me, like, it's not about that. And then even in recent years, I had to make that distinction on another level, because I was doing these Bible studies with these women who would tell me, like, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. God can't forgive you for that. And they would try to manipulate me with the Bible.
Mm-hmm. I've met a lot of people like that.
Yeah. And I'm like, wait a minute, according to your faith, you believe that God forgave you for your sins. Why couldn't he do the same for me? According to my faith,
Right.
you know? And so I started to question God again, because they say you can't question God, but I also learned that it's about your heart posture. Is it coming from a place of humility, or is it coming from a place of pride? So it all goes back to your heart. It all goes back to relationship. And that's the distinction. And so I asked God, I questioned God. I said, God, are you a Bible God, or are you a spirit God, you know, Holy Spirit God? And he told me that he's both. But he also told me that there's people that don't even know him and they have a relationship with the Bible. They don't have a relationship with him because
that's powerful.
Yeah, a relationship is intimacy. And then when you think about it, like, even in the Bible, intimacy was referred to as knowing. You know, like, it's that Abraham knew Sarah and they bore a child together. You know, and it says that all throughout the Bible, this person knew this person and they bore a child. So it's about knowing, intimacy. You got to be able to see into the person. That's why God, his word, he looks at the church as unto a bride. So he compares us to his bride, because it's so much about relationship that he looks at us as the bride of Christ. And that's where he taught me, like, it's not about all of that. That's why I would never walk away from the quote unquote church, because he revealed that we are the church. We are his bride. You know what I'm saying? So it's not about the building. It's not about the people. It's about your intimacy with him, your relationship with him. And so no one could ever make me walk away from God or not believe what I believe, because he's shown me through intimacy. And that's part of the reason why people don't know God, because they don't spend time with him. And, they read the Bible, but it's like, it's a religious practice a lot of times for people. Or it's also just, Mhm. Yeah,
they'd rather take somebody else's word for it than to dive deep inside of themselves and seek their own experience and connection.
exactly. And people don't want to take the time to know him on an intimate level. And I think that's where the misconception comes in at, because even when you read the Bible, I don't read the Bible like I used to read the Bible. I don't read it like it's a chore, like, oh, I got to read the Bible again. I read it from an intimacy standpoint. I read it like that's how you get revelation, because of your relationship. It's his love letter to us. It's the guide for life. It's to help us, And so it's so interesting, like the revelation that God has revealed throughout these years, because the more closer we get to this time of revelation, he's revealing things, and now his word is becoming the living word, because we're seeing the prophecies manifest. And you can't help but to believe that it's true, because we're seeing it happen. But now it's like you can look at it from a intimate standpoint, like, what is God really saying here, So even timing matters, and that's part of the reason why when we read the Bible, it's going to be different even in this time period, because it's like the never ending story. I don't know if you ever seen that
That was
book.
one of my favorite movies, and yeah, I love that. Falcor, right?
Yeah.
So you have, Shamaiah, you've grown your TikTok audience over 100,000 followers, right?
Yes.
Sharing your truth.
Mm-hmm.
What type of impact have you seen your message make on the lives of some of the people that are consuming it? What
That's
type
a
of
great
feedback?
question. The first video that I posted that I noticed was getting some attraction was when I was talking about Roe versus Wade. I actually wasn't necessarily talking about the Bible, but I was giving my perspective based off of that truth. And I was like, wow, other people feel the way that I do. And that's what got me to kind of stick with it. But the message that I posted that really, really let me know that this is a part of my purpose was when I was talking about the chosen ones. Right. And in that moment when I was posting about that, I was actually going through a lot, and I was feeling the weight of my struggle. And I was just like, I hope someone can, I hope I can help someone through this. That was
Right.
my mindset. But I did not ever imagine like how much people would be actually impacted and felt the way that I did in that moment. And so the interesting thing is, because I was trying to help myself. I wanted to help other people, but I was also helping myself. So it was like a twofold thing. And people responded and was saying like, this is me, this is my experience. Oh my God, I felt like I wanted to give up, and this helped me. And I was like, wow, like I found my voice. That's what it did for me. Like it helped other people, but I found my voice, and I felt like, wow, all these times where I felt invisible, even in the church, like I would be skipped over and all this stuff. And I'm like, I would even ask God, like, God, am I invisible or something? Like, this is not making any sense. But then I realized, like, that's actually, because I also got a prophecy about that. Like, that's a part of the recipe for God to exalt someone, is that the way up is down. And how could I be impactful if I didn't feel those things? How could I speak to people and encourage people or talk people off a cliff if I didn't walk through those very experiences? Like, no one can speak into me who have not experienced suffering, because you would
1,000%.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to. I mean, you couldn't possibly be able to speak to me. how could
No,
you understand?
that's how I am in the world of business a lot. In the world of business, I always wanted to learn from people that were actually in business rather than someone that just read about business and regurgitated
Mhm.
the information. So on this journey that you're on, you've actually gone through the suffering. So now your words hold more weight because you're not just preaching and regurgitating, you're coming from a place of personal experience. And I think more people like you are going to be the ones that shift the perspective. Because
Mhm.
think about this. You said something very, very valuable. You said the church is not a building, it's not about that. And
Mhm.
you're doing right now, you're doing what Jesus did just on a digital level. You're out in the world bringing the church to the world, bringing the message to the world through your social media platform, and
Mhm.
not worried about just having these people under this one roof is what I think is why a lot of people have left the traditional side of church because they're finding their spiritual connection. Those of us that are awakening, they're finding their spiritual connection with their own personal relationship, and they're finding more heartfelt messages coming from individuals like you that may be in a different geographical location. So I think you are living exactly what Jesus himself was talking about rather than just being indoctrinated with the religion of it, if that makes sense.
That's so true. Yeah, and I feel like when you walk through certain experiences, you start to realize it's not what we were taught.
Mm-mm,
You have to
mm-mm.
like walk it out to realize like, wait a minute, this is actually what Jesus was doing. He was not even barely in the church. If he came to the church,
Not
it
at
was
all.
to, it was to regulate some things. It wasn't it wasn't to just sit there and be a congregant and go through the religious motions. He wants us to go to the highways and the hedges and and to be out there. He never was in one place. He was always moving. He was on a mission. He was commissioned to be on the mission for his father's business. Like that was his whole thing. And I think sometimes we miss it because we start to go through the religious motions and the traditions, and it actually takes away from the power of God, the supernatural aspect of this journey.
I truly, truly, truly believe that. That's been my experience. It's so funny because when I woke up, I had my awakening in 2011. And right after I had my awakening, I was inspired to write this book that's since gone through different titles, names.
Mhm.
But the first book I wrote was called Searching for God Outside of Church. And it was about me being dissatisfied with what I was taught to believe and coming to my own realization about the nature of reality and
Mhm.
developing my own personal connection with truth, which is I coined what I call the reality underneath the hype. And I think your message is very similar. Like you had the courage to listen to the voice of God that was echoing inside of you
Yeah.
rather than just blindly listening to what everybody else was telling you about God. And I think those are two different things.
Yeah, it is. And that's
And I'm
interesting.
proud of Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's interesting, even your awakening journey and the things that you said you went through that was similar to mine. And I'm interested in also hearing your experience with your suffering and what brought you this far.
Yeah, being growing up in a very man, it was bad. So I had a near death experience at the age of 7.
Wow.
I was involved in a car accident and nearly claimed my life. And when I got out of the hospital, that's when I really remember my upbringing. Up until that point, I never really I was kind of in a hazy, fuzzy state of childhood. But once I got out of the hospital, I realized like, oh my God, My dad's crazy. He's an alcoholic.
Mm.
He is beating on my mother religiously. We're having to run out of the house in the middle of the night, and we're unstable. We're losing, at the time we were always going from one house to another. We were always going to different school systems because my parents could not afford to pay rent. They would always lose the money. It was just very bad. And then at the age of 16, after my mother and father separated, my brother goes over to my father's house, and my father ends up beating my brother badly at the age of 14. So I called my dad screaming, and I was like, I'm gonna fight you the next time I see you. You jumped on my brother, like he loves you unconditionally. Why did you do that to him? And I ended up hanging up the phone with him. And I don't know if it was weeks later or days later, but I found out he ended up dying on his birthday just out of nowhere.
Mm.
So the last words to my father was words of anger. And I remember being at his funeral with mixed emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one part of me was like, wow, death is real. And another part of me was relieved that I didn't have to live in fear of him anymore.
Mm.
And then I got involved in the streets. I started running around with gangs and just being wild, rebelling, like realizing like I had gone through so much in my life. And then as I'm in the streets, I started doing rap music. So I started rapping and became pretty known as a rapper in my local community. And at the age of 27, after attracting an opportunity to sign a record deal with the label out in California, I realized that I was so depressed and so numb on the inside that I did not care if I lived or died.
Wow.
And my last show was in Ogden, Utah. And I actually planned on going back to my hometown from Ogden, Utah, and taking my own life.
Mm.
And I got dropped off at my house. I walked in the house, didn't even turn the lights on. It's like, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm just going to do it. I'm done. I'm tired of suffering. And as I sat down to do it, closed my eyes, and I wanted to feel all the emotions. I want to feel everything. And I just closed my eyes, and I just felt all of the emotions and this heaviness that just, I felt like burdened me for so long. And then all of a sudden, it's like I had this internal dialogue that I'd never heard before. And it started just like saying to me, like, have you done everything you possibly can to change your life? And I'm just going back and forth. It's myself. I'm just having this conversation with myself.
Mm.
Yes, I've done everything, and the world is doing me wrong, and da 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 da. I blamed everybody. And so this voice was just like, you grew up being a victim. You had this near death experience at the age of 7, so that automatically trained yourself to be fearful. Then you grew up in a very violent household. You basically have PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and that has taught you to be very fearful of the world. And you have every right. So, and this voice was just like, but blaming everybody else for your shortcomings isn't getting you anywhere. What if you blamed yourself?
Mm.
And I was like, how am I going to blame myself? My dad did this, I'm crying at this
Yeah.
point. When you get to the point where you can take your own life, I feel like another side of you, if you don't do it, but just sit with that, there's going to be another portal open up that may provide some insight. So I'm like literally wrestling with myself mentally, and I'm crying. I'm like, screw it. I'm tired. I'm crying. And this voice was like, what if you stop blaming everybody else for your shortcomings? What if you lived as if you were 100% responsible for the quality of your life experience? And all of a sudden the tears are just drying up. And I'm like, what do you even mean?
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it yet. For the next 30 days, act as if you control the quality of your life experience. Think on purpose. Like when you wake up, be grateful. Start being grateful. Start thinking better. Start living better. Start taking better action. And instead of taking my life, I agreed to do that for the next 30 days. And after 30 days, I was a completely different person.
Mm.
I felt happiness for the first time in my life, like without drugs, without alcohol. I felt like I felt like a new person. I felt like I had the same body, but a new spirit entered my body. And I remember I got on the phone and I called my mom. I called all my friends. I called everybody that I possibly could. And I'm like, oh my God, I figured it out. You guys have to forgive. You have to forgive everyone and everything. Everybody thought I was crazy, of course.
Yeah.
And I just stayed on the journey. That was the age of 27. I'm 40 now. And I just stayed on the journey and just continued to work with my mind. And that's my passion. My slogan is I teach people how to master their minds and make money online because I'm a business owner. But the mindset of everything is what I'm here to train people on because people don't know their minds are powerful.
Hmm.
We get duped from an early age a lot of times to believe that we have no power and we allow the world to do our thinking for us rather than us deciding how we want to think. And so long story, that's a long way of saying that's my story. Sorry.
That's powerful. That's really, really powerful because some people don't make it out. Some people don't
Right.
find that inner strength to even get to the other side. And the fact that you were
Yes.
able to find that and like turn your life around completely to a whole nother level, that's that's quite the testimony.
Thank you. Thank you. I That's why I'm here talking to people like you because you know it's like the cool part about it. So Richard down there in the corner, he owns this software. He's the owner of this software that we're using called Go Brunch. But we came up with this idea to like interview like-minded people. Richard and his team knows me so much that they're on everybody they schedule me with are people that I'm like, I love this. I love her story. I love his story. I love so it's like people like you are what I'm passionate about. You have a real message, you've gone through real things in life, and you can really help people out. And that's what this is about. It's about helping people like you reach even a bigger audience.
Mhm.
And so, with that said, I got to say thank you for what you're doing out here because that's powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, if someone wanted to reach out to you, what platform or what form of contact do you suggest the most?
I suggest, I don't really be on Instagram like that, but I do suggest my Instagram because it's more easier to connect with me. With TikTok, you kind of have to be having a mutual follow in order for you to get
Yeah.
through. So I usually just suggest my Instagram, which is Shamaiah M, which meaning Shamaiah M for Manriquez. And but if not, I don't mind giving my email, which is Shamaiah Manriquez at Gmail.
Awesome, awesome, phenomenal. Shamaya, this has been very insightful, very heartwarming, and powerful at the same time. I gotta say, this your story, your insights. I know this is just a tip of the
Oh
iceberg.
yeah.
I'm highly suggesting that everybody out there go follow Shamaya on all platforms. And if you need guidance, Shamaya, do you offer any type of coaching or anything like that?
So yes, that's a service that I'm offering soon on my website, which is beautiful for him. So that's also my ministry and my brand, beautiful for him. I would have to put the link in order for people to, or they can like just click the link on my TikTok or Instagram. But yeah, so that's my ministry, and then I'm going to be offering coaching, life coaching services. I just went through the completion of my certification for life coaching.
Phenomenal. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. And reach out to either myself or Richard if you need any help growing this brand and monetizing it. Thank you so much
Sounds
for your
good. I
time,
will do
Shamaiah.
that. And it's been great. And I'm grateful to connect with you and meet you.
Grateful to connect with you as well. Reach out if you need anything. I'm here for it.
Will do.